I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Today, we are talking a topic that everybody loves. We are talking restaurants, dining out, but how to do it as nutritiously as possible while you're still indulging in those favorites. And I'm joined today by someone who I think you are going to love listening to. She's a wealth of information and she's hilarious as she's going to share her stories. So I'm joined by Lorin Gaudin. She is a food writer, food editor. She's got a huge, long history in the culinary world. She's been a culinary instructor. She does digital marketing for the culinary industry. She's an avid cook herself. She has been a writer for some of the most famous chefs in the country, which I'm going to ask her to share some of these stories with us, and has a degree in theater, everything. She's a paralegal. So whatever you need Lorin to do, she can hop in and help you. But today she's joining me because in addition to all those things we just said, Lorin is super passionate about nutrition. She has discovered a lot of things for herself that really work well nutritionally and has kind of found ways that she can kind of assimilate these into restaurants whenever she's going out and ordering. And she'll kind of, what do you call it? You frankenfood your foods.
Yeah,
yes.
I call it frankenfoods. Yeah, where I cobble things together to make it work.
So we'll be talking different types of cuisines, what to order that can, first of all, some of our favorites at these, but also our favorites that are still going to be in line with most nutritional stuff that we're going to be following. So welcome, Lorin.
Thanks a lot, Molly. I'm looking forward to it because I'm sure you're going to tell me that I'm eating stuff that really isn't really that good for me and rock my foundation.
But if you're cobbling together things and you're clearing out that white carb, you're doing all that stuff, it's still going to be better than what was going to end up on the plate.
Oh, thank you. I love that support. That's awesome.
So
thank you.
When we're talking about restaurants, that's one where, we have our Eat Fit here in New Orleans and throughout Louisiana where we kind of do a lot of that work for you. We work with restaurants to incorporate these nutritious options that's identified with the Eat Fit seal. But there's a ton of restaurants, obviously, that don't have Eat Fit on the menu. And outside of Louisiana, there's a whole other world out there. So, and chain restaurants, the whole bit. But when we're dining out, I think a lot of people are hesitant to put in that special order, that special request, but encouraging them not to be.
It's definitely difficult because various and sundry health movements have created issues with the restaurant industry. So when people started going gluten-free, there was a chef's collective eye roll. They were all rolling their eyes. And my response to all of that is, I'm sorry, are you allergic to money? Because my understanding of what you do for a living is that you cook food for money. And if someone says that they're gluten-free, as long as they're not, being a brat about it, your answer is yes, of course I can take care of that for you. I'm sure you have vegetables in the walk-in. I feel confident you have some form of protein, whether it's tofu or plant-based or animal-based. You can hook people up. It's pretty simple. And so I think what has happened is now it's become more accepting of all the various dietary restrictions, and the restaurants aren't allergic to money, and they will indeed accommodate. And there is a fine line. My favorite story is about a chef told me that a guy came into the restaurant and brought his own steak. and wanted him and said, well, I only eat grass-fed meat. And, now that's just crossing a line. Or I was sitting in a restaurant and a couple opened up a reusable grocery bag and pulled out, I kid you not, a box grater and a piece of cheese.
That's hilarious.
They were grating their own. Now, that's going to just make people mad.
But you know what? As much as I love cheese and really good cheese, if I went to a restaurant and I thought they were using just kind of that fake Parmesan cheese, I would, if someone next to me had that, I would be like, can I have some? Like, please grate some of your own cheese onto here if it's good stuff,
I get it, but that's really bold.
Right.
And I think that there's a really kind way of going about it and asking people to accommodate and to help you without making huge changes and asking them to recreate a menu just for you. And that's really, really important. So what I try to do when I go out, and as you know, I right now am eating no refined sugar, no refined carbs at all. And rather than be a pain in the tushy, I will more often than not, if I can tell from the way that the staff is acting and the menu is composed, I'll simply order the burger, and then I'll just very politely put the bun to the side. I can't stand doing that because it's wasteful and that makes me nuts. So more often than not, I'll put it in I'll ask them to bag the bread, and then I go out and feed it to the ducks at the park or something, because that way at least it's not wasting. And I know.
But if you pick up the positive vibe from them, then you would say, "Can I just get the burger patty with the bun?" Right.
Precisely.
So kind of gauging your audience in the terms and frame of the terms of the restaurant. I agree, because if it's someone who's just engaging with this, they're welcoming, and some restaurants embrace it. They ask right off the bat if there are any intolerances or anything. But kind of gauging it, and what I'll recommend is looking at the menu, and you can size up what's on there. And let's just say that you're getting whatever that lean protein is that you have your eye on, but it comes with risotto or couscous or some other type of starch that you don't want. But you see something else on the menu. You didn't want that as an entree, but it comes with, wilted spinach or some sort of sauteed veg or whatever.
Right.
It's an easy thing, and just a
or even
polite
cauli
request.
risotto, which now everyone's offering as a cauliflower risotto, and they'll do it.
And so if you see anything on the menu that's a side item, and you think that that is a nice vegetable-based side item that you want to pair with a lean protein that's somewhere else on the menu, almost always the restaurants are going to do it.
They do now, and that's because they realize really it's not that complicated to do. It just was very in vogue at one point in time to be sort of sassy and like I said, eye rolling about it. Like that was part of the thing in the industry, was to take punches at people with their dietary restrictions.
I'll still have sometimes a waiter will say, "Let me check with chef," and I'm thinking, are they deciding if they think that that's palatable to put the wilted spinach instead of the risotto?
And then they're going and make fun of you,
right?
Because that does happen. And listen, and that really. It does
we went to a restaurant. It was actually in Monroe a few weeks ago, and it's a fantastic restaurant. And they had a salmon, and it came with some sort of a starch, but there was a different entree, and it came with like a carrot puree and maybe a parsnip puree. And I was like, oh man. So I asked, is it possible to have those two, carrot and parsnip puree with a salmon instead? They said, yes, let me go check with chef. And I thought, is he really? Well, then we met with the chef the next day because we were there for a project with him. And I said, oh man, I loved your restaurant. I had the salmon. I swapped it out for this. And he's like, oh yes, I remember you.
That tells you everything you need to know. And it's so funny. They're like, oh, we've got one of those at table, and listen, do they do it? Yes. Do they make fun? Yes. Is that part of the whole deal? The front of house, back of house thing really does exist. And yeah, they, chefs don't mind most of the time. It's really all in how you present.
And making it as easy as possible, making it seamless. Yeah.
Yeah.
So not recreating a whole nother thing, and being selective in what we do, special request.
Also too, people will come in and have crazy allergies that you just kind of go like, I'm allergic to salt. And then the room is like that thing,
right?
The screech of the record, and you're like, you're allergic to salt. How are you living?
Right.
But nobody would ask that. But you know that they're not. I think now you would be more inclined to say, I'm very salt sensitive, or I'm watching my sodium.
Yeah, or even I'm watching my carbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's all about how you approach it. And saying something kind of goofy is a trigger. It's a trigger for back of house. And believe me, they have some good times with that.
And so being super polite. And I think with kind of a mainstream traditional restaurant, it's pretty easy to navigate the menu because
absolutely,
if it's if it's a filet, you've got a lean option. If it's a hanger steak, flank, or any flat iron, fish, as long as it's not battered and grilled. I think those are really straightforward.
Battered and fried, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Battered and grilled would be really messy.
Right. Battered and fried. Thank you. And so what Lorin and I will be talking more about today is cuisines outside of kind of traditional. And tell us this. So when we're talking about cuisines, a lot of people refer to it as ethnic cuisine. You say, please stop. Tell us why.
Please. Well, there is a movement within the food writing world and within the food world in general to avoid that word ethnic, because what does it actually mean? If you're Mexican, Mexican food isn't ethnic. If you are Japanese,
Right.
Japanese food, it's almost on the same vein as we're thankfully moving away from using the word Oriental. Do you know? I mean, it's just
Someone's
awful.
parents always still do it, though.
Of course they do, because if there's a generation of people, and you know what? You smile and you nod and you don't correct them and say, you mean Asian,
Right.
Oriental's a rug. No, yes, we think those things, but gee whiz, I think we can be kind. But the idea behind ethnic, there's a fabulous writer. She is the writer, she is the food critic for the San Francisco Chronicle. Her name is Soleil Ho. She actually lived in New Orleans for a long time and wrote here. And Soleil Ho wrote a very interesting piece about the words that she was never going to use again in her writing. And among them is the word ethnic. And there has been a big jumping off from that. And the alternatives, people have started sort of racking their brain. What are we going to say instead? So oftentimes global, international, world cuisine, to avoid the word ethnic, which just really falls flat and feels like the word Oriental.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right. Calling it an ethnic restaurant, if it's a Mexican restaurant and you are Mexican, it's not.
Well, and let's think about this. The James Beard people, the foundation, a year or so ago awarded as an American classic a Vietnamese bakery. A Vietnamese bakery is an American classic. I hope I don't need to repeat that, because that's so cool, right? That just tells you everything you need to know about where we stand in America with regard to the variety of cuisines that are part of our our fiber, our fabric. And I think that I just smiled ear to ear when that happened, because I thought, this is a really good step in the right direction.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Of embracing all, and it becomes part of what America is. From all of these
Absolutely.
places, which is what we are.
Yes, we are. I mean, I know it's very cliche to talk about it being a big melting pot, but hello, we totally
Right.
are. So it's wonderful. And that's why that's why the word ethnic is sort of outre.
So global. Global's easy.
Global,
I
international.
like the word global anyway.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So a couple of things I'll run through just kind of to hit the high spots before we go into each of the different types of cuisines. Like we said earlier, and this is just if you're like, okay, give me the rundown, like what's the quick and dirty? So making sure if you're reaching for protein, that's a meat base, that it's lean, it's not fried, it's not battered, grilled, baked, etc. But not being afraid of beef, not being afraid of pork or lamb. So lamb loin, pork loin, those lean cuts of beef, those are going to be okay. They're also very lean. You don't have to limit yourself to just chicken, turkey, fish. So being aware of that. When it comes to portion sizes, a lot of times I'll hear someone say that they're going to split an entree with someone to keep portions in check. But if that protein is only 4 to 6 ounces, it might not be enough to split. So
Right.
I don't like to kind of use that as an always rule. Usually, now if you're going somewhere and you've got 2 big center cut pork chops, they're 8 ounces each, they're kind of piled
Holy
on each
smoke.
other. Okay. But so other things, sauces on the side, I do like that. If you're not sure, if you haven't ordered it before, you don't know just what you're getting it on the side can be nice, because then you control how much you add, and you don't know if it's going to be a little or a lot that ended up on the plate or whatever.
That's a little complicated depending on
the
which
dish.
global cuisine you are, the restaurant you're in. Because, for instance, if you're in a Japanese restaurant and you are eating, everybody calls it sushi, those crazy giant rolls with, a ton of rice, and hopefully if you're eating rice, you're doing the brown rice. I don't eat rice right now at all. And by the way, neither do a lot of my Japanese friends. In fact, my very favorite sushi chef is diabetic. And he is skinny as a rock. But what he was telling me is that throughout Japan, they're having more of an incidence of diabetes from the refined, grains. So there it is. But so let's say you're in there and you're eating some kind of sushi roll or whatever, and they always are squirting some kind of crazy sauce on American style
Right.
Japanese cuisine. Those sauces are easy to ask for on the side. And the presumption typically in a lot of Asian restaurants is that Americans, Caucasians, prefer to like a lot of sauce. So I found my own personal thing is that I found that people oftentimes will very surprised that I don't want a lot of sauce or that I want it on the side. It's easier in some restaurants than in others. So for instance, it's a little more complicated in a Chinese restaurant, when they're sauteing with it than it is like eating sushi to get those sauces on the side. But
You
it
know
can
what
be
I'll
done.
do in Chinese restaurants, though? They can still do a steam
Yes,
and then give you
exactly.
the sauce on the side.
They
But you're right,
can.
a saute is almost impossible because they've got some of it in there. But that is one. Now, I don't like to order it with none of the sauce because I do think if someone orders whatever that steak is, no sauce, I want to know what that tastes like. I want to enjoy some of it. So I definitely
Sure.
still want it to come out. When it comes to the breads, the stuff that comes on the table first, this is one that's kind of a big. One of my clients said one time, I don't eat anything that's free, that's brought out to my table first.
Nothing is free. I don't know where they got this idea.
But the chips, the bread, the stuff that's just the kind of like, the extras that the restaurant brings. And she was right because they are typically going to be carb based. You get the basket of chips, you get the bread, you get the crackers, those little nibbles before are starch. They're just carb. And so what I usually recommend is if you're going out, if you're a person that dines out daily and this is just part of your lifestyle, it isn't a special occasion. And I am okay if someone says, I'm not going to have those things and they kind of, make their mind up. For the person though, who this is once a month, they're going out and this is a special occasion, I do want you to have some of those things that are really important to you. But when it comes to whether it's the bread or the free stuff first or an alcohol containing drink or a dessert or that starchy side, pick one.
Right.
So thinking of those as interchangeable, your bread, your alcohol, your starchy side, or your dessert, splitting a dessert. But those are all kind of your starches. And so negotiate
It's
with
a
yourself.
great idea to
Which
do
do you
that.
really want?
Yeah.
And again,
right.
if you're dining out every single day, well, we probably don't need to split dessert with someone every single day. But if it's that special occasion, pick one.
Right.
And you know who you are. If you're like, oh my gosh, for me, I could get in the bread basket and I'm happy. I could pass on the dessert, and so you know who you are, but pick what's really worth it. And then of course, I'm kind of just running through these before we get into our global cuisine, but limiting the starches, I always, if possible, if we can hold the starch, get the extra veg instead, especially because restaurants, stuff's going to creep in. Those extra calories from something are creeping in. So if we can at least not have a lot of the rice, pasta, potato and get the veg instead, we're usually going to be better off. So those are kind of just some of the quick and dirties. There's more, but when we start talking global cuisine, we have no rhyme or reason of the order we're going to talk. But let's start with Vietnamese. I think
Sure.
I think that's a challenge for a lot of people because it's still new to a lot of people.
It is that, which is amazing in the grand scheme of things, because of course I can tell you that in the South region, the Vietnamese came here, of course, at the fall of Saigon. And so we've had a big Vietnamese community here since the 70s, right? Since the mid 70s. And, but the food has become more popularized. And interestingly enough, there is a whole Vietnamese section of the menu that they will do vegetarian. Now, here's where you have to be thoughtful and careful, because when you eat vegetarian, they understand vegetables and tofu. Tofu tends to be fried, and the broth tends to be chicken, which would not be vegetarian. Now, most of the Vietnamese cooks are getting smarter and better about fixing that. So when you're looking through the menus in a Vietnamese restaurant, you do have to be thoughtful. The word com, C-O-M, pardon me to my Vietnamese friends who I adore, my accent is terrible, that just means rice. You know immediately. It's very interesting. The word banh mi means wheat. And so it represents anything, a noodle, a
And you spell
bread,
that B-A.
N-H, next word M-I.
Mm-hmm.
And that covers a huge amount of ground. So just because many people think it's a sandwich, no, it's actually the Vietnamese word for wheat. So noodles are also a type of banh, and so is the bread. Obviously, since we're avoiding that stuff, listen, you could ostensibly order one of those things and then take the ham or the meats or the vegetables in there and do your own fun little roll up with maybe some of their house-made mayonnaise and have a party for yourself. And that way you'd be eating a sort of a modified banh mi, and everybody would probably be staring at you like you're nutty. But there
Extra
is one.
napkins, right?
Yeah, but there's really great ways to eat around. You have to be thoughtful and careful. A lot of marinades have soy sauce. Soy sauce has wheat in it, always. And they don't use tamari.
Which matters if you're trying to follow a gluten-free diet, right?
That is correct.
Right.
Or if you're avoiding any of the, if you're avoiding wheat for whatever reasons, right? But certainly, yeah. And so you have to be very careful and thoughtful to the fact that they probably will do some of the marinating The pho is great. One of the best things I do when I go in a Vietnamese restaurant is I will get the chicken soup. I'll get pho gác, which is chicken soup, no noodles, extra vegetables, and extra meat. And one of the places I go to, they actually use beautiful roasted fresh chicken, and they use the dark meat and the white meat, and it'll even still have a bit of the skin and the fat on it, which I know if people are eating more plant-based,
But it's not that
forgive
much
me.
that's in there,
No, no,
right?
no, no, no. It's slivers. But I like that because, of course, fat is our friend. Fat is where the flavor is. So, and that's what I adore. But you can do just vegetables in there. You could ask for tofu. You can get all kinds of things. Eating in the Vietnamese restaurants and maintaining dietary and nutritional consciousness is a little bit more challenging. Things tend to be fried, but even when you get a fresh spring roll, goi cuisine, the wrapper is rice paper.
Right. It's white rice.
Yeah,
It's hard.
so it's
I
hard.
think pho is, I think a lot of people's kind of most common, they're familiar with that.
Right.
If you're like, what are they saying? And you're calling it pho, then we're
They
talking
don't
about
care.
that. Right.
Yeah.
And so pho, but it's pronounced pho, which is hard for people to get used to. That is probably one of the most popular, especially for newbies who are going to
Absolutely.
Vietnamese restaurants. And so just like Lorin said, it normally comes with the noodles, the vermicelli in there. Easily ask them not to do that. Get extra bean sprouts, get extra veg instead. And they're putting things like, it might be cabbage, the bean sprouts, herbs, all types of vegetables.
All of
in
that
there.
stuff. That's exactly what I do. In fact, I have them bring me a side of cabbage. Shredded cabbage is typically served alongside a soup called bún bò Huế. But they always have plates of it. So I will generally ask for a side plate of the cabbage.
So that's a
always
great
bring that.
tip, though, for a Vietnamese restaurant to know that that's kind of a standard that you can
yes.
ask for. And it's a nice filler. Even if you don't love cabbage, just plain and raw, you put it in your pho and it's going to kind of
It wilts. Yeah.
And it's going to just give you something like that noodle would be.
It is. It's great. It does. I never thought about it being texturally, kind of an interesting replacement, but it absolutely is. You just let it sit in there. The soup is hot enough that it'll wilt it and soften it up just enough. And you will get that sensation of noodle. That's absolutely true. And adding, jalapeno and all of the herbs. They also oftentimes will give you various basils or mint and those kinds of things, which are, delicious and really enhance those flavors that are, the cinnamon and the anise and all the flavors that are deep in those broths, especially if you do like pho, which is with beef in it, right? The word for beef is bo. So it's really a wonderful way to dine, but it is somewhat a little bit limiting in Vietnamese. Although there are some really cool salads. You just have to be with someone who can help you navigate the menu. You can call me.
Right. and we'll also be putting Lauren's social handles and stuff like that too on their
Thanks.
episode so that you can message her with questions.
Absolutely.
We won't maybe give your email unless you want it. But
I don't mind.
what I would say on the pho is if someone's watching their sodium, you're just out of luck. There's nothing you can do with that.
Right on.
Because the broth, we actually had, I had done a breakdown a couple of years back of how does it measure up? Because it's hard to find the nutrition specs. We actually got pho from several different restaurants and kind of deconstructed. Wow. We pulled out how much of everything is in here and how much liquid's in here and what's the broth. Probably looking at about 1,500 milligrams of sodium.
Oh.
So if you're,
that's better than I thought it would be.
If you're, it depends on how big that bowl is too.
Oh, okay.
But
if
you're losing a lot of sweat, if you're exercising, you may not need to watch sodium. And a lot of people don't have a sodium sensitivity and it's not an issue. But if you are watching sodium, then pho is probably not going to be best. But at places like a Vietnamese restaurant, you can tell us too, but there's steamed fish and there's a salad like a lotus root salad, which I'm not even going to try on the name of that. But the proteins that we can add are grilled pork, grilled shrimp. They're lean. And so adding this to your salad is going to be your safer way. Kind of all that stuff we just said would go in pho with that protein. You can almost essentially get the same stuff as a salad.
And then there's also in the Vietnamese menu, there is roasted chickens and duck and quail. Pardon me. And the roasted chicken, duck, and quail are phenomenal. And they also there's a steamed chicken that you can also get. And it's a little on the blandish side, but it's intentionally so. And the pickled vegetables. And the only difficulty with the pickled vegetables that tend to come on the side is the sugar that tends to be in those. But you're eating such a small amount. I can't imagine. I mean, you can tell us, I'm sure.
No, the amount of sugar that goes into traditional pickling is going to be, it looks like a lot when they're doing it in a whole big gallon pail. But it's
when
really,
you're talking about eating like a carrot slice
exactly.
or whatever.
And the same with sodium on that. So your pickled, kind of all the pickled veg, it's like that. First of all, you're not eating that much of it. But a lot of times they're pickled with just the vinegar and a trace amount of salt and sugar in relation to how much is soaking in. So those are things that I would kind of just consider freebies for people. And as you're dining out and you're kind of thinking, I'm trying to kind of stick with the parameters of whatever nutrition thing I'm following, I think the biggest thing is focus on what matters. And that's one of the things that we're going to hope to kind of help y'all kind of think through is what matters. So if sodium doesn't matter to you and you love soup, go for it. Get that pho, swap out your starch, get extra veg. If sodium matters, okay, then let's look at that. So kind of think of like what's your need and then kind of start to base your menu on that.
And then they also often have kimchi on the menu because there's a lot of crossover of Korean flavors and on the Vietnamese menus. So typically, depending on my mood, I might get a roasted or steamed chicken and get kimchi. And then, and again,
and tell our listeners what kimchi is if they're not familiar.
Oh, pardon me. I will. Kimchi is pickling, way of pickling in Korea. In the instance that I'm talking about, it's cabbage that is kimchied. But kimchi can be anything from daikon radish to turnip to melon or chayote if you're not from the South. And so kimchi is when you take and you ferment a vegetable with a lot of very strong spices, and you put it in a fermentation jar, and then it's left to really get nice and funky and intense. So if you like funky and you like intense and sometimes it's really hot and sometimes it's just really bold and sharp in flavor. And it's really delicious with those chicken meats. It's really nice counterpoint. And that you can do at Vietnamese restaurants for sure.
And kimchi is also side benefit, a great source of probiotics because of all that fermentation in there.
Ooh la la. I love it.
And so that's going to kind of be, I think, our down and dirty for that. Green mango salad is something that if a Vietnamese restaurant, if you're fortunate to see that on the menu, I love green mango. It's still starch because it's
I
the
would have
mango.
found that more on a Thai menu, no?
And I'm going to point to what this is called here at Vietnamese menus.
Hang on a minute. I have to put on my glasses. I'm an old lady. Oh, I see. Okay. So goi means cabbage. And that's in Vietnamese. So there's a really fabulous salad called goi ga. Goi ga means cabbage chicken. And if you can get them to get it to you before they've put the dressing, which has got oodles of sugar in it, that's really good. I am not sure about the green mango salad, but I've never had it in a Vietnamese restaurant, but that doesn't mean anything.
And on
that's
these
awesome.
notes, I don't know which specific Vietnamese restaurant I got it from, but I pulled it off of
I'll
Vietnamese
be looking it
menus.
up.
I know. I'm going to have to pull it and see.
I'm looking forward to that one.
And you just said something that made me think.
I was talking about goi ga and the cabbage salad and the dressing that goes on it.
Yes. Okay. So one of the things, going back to sodium, and again, many, many people don't need to watch their sodium. And we've done whole podcasts on that before. And it's the one, if you are interested in your sodium and what do you really need to watch, it's the podcast we did with Dr. Rich Milani. He's one of our cardiologists. He is kind of shed some light on sodium isn't always as bad as we think. So if you want more information, we've got that there for you. But one of the highest sodium ingredients, I think, quite frankly, on the planet is fish sauce.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 1,400 milligrams of sodium in a tablespoon.
Well, and then it also depends on the quality of the fish sauce as well, because there are huge varieties. If you go into the Asian market, there's usually about 8 to 10 feet of all different kinds of fish sauce. And the one that you really want, if you're being fancy-pantsy, is from a little small island off of Vietnam where they make it there. Most of the time, it is an amalgam of a lot of yucky stuff that we don't really, it's kind of cobbled together. It's a bit of a Franken food. But there's also an organic brand called Red Boat. and it's delicious. And it's really good. But yeah,
It's
it's
crazy.
wicked salty.
It's wicked salty. And when we say 1,400 milligrams of sodium per tablespoon, that's like 3 times what you're going to get from like a reduced sodium soy sauce. And
Holy
reduced
smoke.
sodium soy sauce is so high. It's about double what you're going to get in regular soy sauce. So it's really high. But if you can get by with one of these, like a little bit goes a long way. Okay. But just being aware that if you are dining out and salt's an issue, if something does have fish sauce in it, it's really hard.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's absolutely true. I mean, like I make bone broth and I put fish sauce in it, but I only put a tablespoon
For
in
your
a
whole
huge
batch.
amount. Yeah.
And glass noodles is something that I get a lot of questions about. So sometimes you'll see them called cellophane noodles or mung bean noodles. They're called glass noodles. They're kind of translucent. So they look like they would be really low carb. They look like little nothingness on there, but they're really starchy. They're about the same carbs and calories as a traditional type of noodle.
Right.
But no fiber or anything else. And so these little glass noodles, cellophane noodles, mung bean noodles, if you see those, you're not doing any better.
Absolutely. In fact, they make them from tapioca starch. They make them from sweet potato, konjac, the konjac root, and there's a whole different bunches of them. And yeah, they are sneaky.
Now, if you're cooking at home and you're using something like these shirataki noodles that are in stores, those are very low everything. But we're talking the stuff in restaurants, the glass noodles, and you'll see sometimes in grocery stores. Of course, you're in the section where you would buy your Asian food ingredients and stuff. You would see glass noodles, and they look like
Yeah, they'd be a dream.
yeah, because you can't even see them; they're invisible there.
The dream is gone.
Anything else we want to cover with Vietnamese before we move on to our next?
I would say that
cuisine?
the only thing I can tell you is that you do have to skip sweets
Yeah.
in the Vietnamese.
Even their
the
coffee.
bubble teas. The Vietnamese coffee, unless you get it without the condensed milk, if you get that's called like cafe soda. The only other thing I could tell you is that there's a wonderful Vietnamese style drink called soda cham. Soda cham is basically bubble water club soda and fresh squeezed lime juice and sugar. But many places will either allow you to not put any then, or if you use a sugar substitute. So if you have your stevia or your erythritol or whatever it is that you are using, you can get them to do a soda cham, and it will not mess with the sugar stuff and your nutrition that way. The rest of those drinks have egg, soda, a lot of condensed milk, Thai tea,
And sweetened condensed milk.
Yes, sweetened condensed milk, and it's heavy duty. You can get them without it. The coffee is a big deal. Of course, the French colonization of Vietnam. That's why you have this heavy coffee thing, and people are really digging. And they brought that love with them to the United States, and so those things are. But I'm thinking more about the mung bean desserts with the coconut milk and the gelatin. I love those things, but yeah. Those you'd have to skip by on those. And other than that, you just have to read really, really carefully and be thoughtful to it. And then don't make yourself nuts.
Don't make yourself nuts and negotiate for the stuff that
Yeah.
truly is worth it to you. And how special is this event or occasion? If it's a restaurant you go to almost never, well, then you might kind of lighten it up a bit. But if it's someplace you're going on a regular basis, we got to get something down that's going to work.
Right.
Let me ask you this. How
Sure.
are you so familiar with these Vietnamese terms and saying them so well?
Oh my goodness.
Do you
That's
know
very kind of you.
Vietnamese?
Culinary Vietnamese.
Okay.
It has to do with my history. Right after I went to culinary school, I went to culinary school in France, and I came back, and my husband and I both fell in love with French Vietnamese food, and we came back and we were looking for it here, and we stumbled upon Pho Ta Bai, and then they became my family, the people that own that restaurant here in the New Orleans area, and they've now moved to Pennsylvania. At Lancaster, and they have great restaurants there. And they're family to me. So I learned a lot of what I know from them. But also late in my career life, I worked for the Internal Revenue Service in the criminal investigation unit of the Internal Revenue Service. And I worked with agents who were Vietnamese. And that's a really strange cultural phenom because There is a cultural thing about being a rat, about snitching. And so finding Vietnamese people at that time, and I'm going back almost 30 years now. I mean, it was 1997. How many years was that? Whatever it is. That was not really done. So there were there was one guy in the FBI, one guy at Internal Revenue Service, and a couple guys working with parish law enforcement. And I spent a great deal of time with them because we worked on a lot of Asian organized crime task force things. So I would go out and eat with them, and I learned from them.
That's cool. Yeah.
That's how I learned.
So your secret agent missions also.
Femme Nikita.
Right.
New Orleans style.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Where should we go from here as far as our next stop around the globe?
You know what? We can do a million things. Do you want to do, we could do Central American, South American food if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think so too. That's that basket of chips kind of thing. Well, so first and foremost, of course, the complication is whether or not something is truly Mexican cuisine. What does that actually mean? Are we talking about Tex-Mex? Are we talking about Cal-Mex? Are we talking about Baja? But let's put all those cultural barriers aside, and let's talk tacos, right? Tacos is, well, my goodness, who doesn't love tacos, right? I think, if you don't, I don't know what to do with you. But oftentimes, of course, you're talking about flour tortillas. Do we really need to go into what's in those? We know that it's not that they're bad, but if you're avoiding those things,
right,
then yes, they are. Corn tortillas are divine and they're wonderful. Again, though, if you're avoiding the refined stuff, or in my case, I'm avoiding all of that stuff, I'm not going to eat a corn tortilla. But every now and again, I do, for Pete's sake.
And on that note, if you're faced with the decision, okay, I'm going to get grilled steak tacos or grilled shrimp tacos, grilled fish tacos, you've got your lean protein, et cetera. And they say, do you want flour or wheat or flour or corn tortillas? The better answer for everybody listening is going to be soft corn tortillas. If you're going to do if you're going to do a tortilla on your tacos or whatever, they're lower calorie, but their sodium is crazy lower. And you're going to get so much other sodium that's happening inside of that taco. But whereas a normal little taco, small taco wrap might be 150 milligrams of sodium.
In a 4-6 inch tortilla?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, because I'm thinking like the big burrito style ones are often like 800.
Yeah.
So when we're doing kind of, like your little taco size fajita, tortilla wrap, about 150, 200.
Cool.
That corn, soft tortilla, 10 milligrams of sodium. It's crazy.
Holy
And slightly
smoke.
lower carbs. So they're still carbs, but they're just less than what's in the flour. So that's one that it's nice because we're also, if you're going to, any type of South or Central American type restaurant, Mexican restaurant, whatever, you're going to probably get some sodium and a whole bunch of other things. So if we can trim back there. But you can do other types of things around your taco to where you're not even having the bread.
Absolutely.
Or just eat the stuff out of the middle of them if they don't have that option.
And that's a great thing. And for those people who are saying, oh, well, gee, what about us keto eaters? A lot of these restaurants will make chicharron, right? Which are fried pork skins. And guess what? You can make nachos out of the chicharron. You can use your chicharron for queso dip. Most quesos have nothing, there's not cornstarch in them to thicken them. They're literally just nothing but cheeses and milks, right? And so you can do that kind of a thing. Now, if you're minding your fat and you're being nutritious, that's probably not going.
It sounds delicious.
It sounds good, but
you're
it's
right.
really not.
For talking to our keto listeners, yeah, that's a home run. What I like to do is instead of the chips, a lot of restaurants will do even sliced veg, like sliced cucumbers.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite restaurants here does sliced cucumbers with just a little bit of seasoning on it. And then I'll just do that, dipped in that guacamole.
Absolutely.
And it's so good.
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
While the chips are fine, they're also, when I'm going there, I like the house-made guacamole. I like other things even better than the chips. So to me, if I'm going to kind of look at what's really worth it, the chips are just a vehicle for me to get into that other stuff.
Absolutely. Then, of course, you always have these various taco salads. Clearly, you're not going to, the one that's in the fried bowl, I mean, really, okay.
We don't have to even say it.
Yeah, let's go. All right. But you can get that salad without the fried bowl or eat it, eat the innards, if you will, of it. And you can have a dollop of sour cream, a dollop of the guacamole. And you can eat the various different kinds of chicken or pork or beef as long as it's not fried, right? And then you're keeping things a little more nutritious. And then you look at the pico de gallo, which is really nothing but chopped vegetables, which is wonderful. I usually like to look to ceviche. Ceviche is a wonderful way to go around the situation and get a really nice meal because it's fish and avocado, and oftentimes that's pretty much it. Sometimes radishes
And
are
sometimes
in
they're
there.
so generous with the serving size of it because they're intending for a table to maybe split it as an appetizer. So ordering it as your entree can even work a lot of times.
I do that a
Yeah.
lot, to be honest with you. And the other thing too is that nowadays people are more cognizant. So again, and in any of your Latin American restaurants, I'm talking about Honduran, Venezuelan, Colombian, the Colombian restaurants, almost everything is gluten-free by nature. So when you get the green plantains, tostones, patacones, if the different places call them different things, that's a mashed twice fried plantain. Okay, now I know you're going, oh, Lorin, not fried, but it's at least gluten-free, right? And it's about a 2-inch round. And if you had that and you put your meat or your veg on top of that and you made yourself like a little kind of
Right.
a canapé, that's not going to kill you.
Exactly.
And I know that the amount of carbohydrate in one little tostone, and I know that for me, if I'm eating below 50 grams of carbohydrate a day, I can have 3 of those little guys, and it doesn't kill me. So I know that they're about 7
And it's like
grams
sheer
apiece.
pleasure for you.
Yeah, definitely. So again, depending on which Central or South American cuisine you're going for, you're going to look for things that are on the menu that are going to be fish-based, as you know, grilled, steamed, not often steamed stuff there, but most often you can get a grilled fish of some kind. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes you'll find that they serve tilapia. I am not going to recommend that you eat tilapia. You can be mad at me. Tilapia World can be mad at me, but that is a giant goldfish. Lolo does not eat goldfish. And so I'm not and farmed fish. Please always look on the menu for wild caught. I think Molly would probably echo that. And the other thing too is remembering too that it's important that menus also have to tell you where their seafood is from. There's a law in place in Louisiana. I'm sure it exists elsewhere. Never mind truth in menu, but it must say. So if you're eating seafood, you should know where it's coming from so that you know. And farmed seafood, I don't mean to hurt anybody, but farmed seafood has its own set of peculiarities that don't make it delicious in my book. But again, eat the best you can on the budget that you have and with what's available. So I'm not going to shame anybody. No way. And eating that. So you're nutritionally speaking, and of course, there's always a lot of cabbage. There's always in these in any type of a Latin American restaurant, there's going to be some vegetables of all different stripes.
And when you think of all the things that are going to go into the pico de gallo or salsa anyway, right?
The only thing is that oftentimes if you go into, say, particularly a Mexican restaurant where they might have a shrimp cocktail, you've got to be careful because, of course, that cocktail sauce oftentimes is loaded with sugar. And so that's going to be a big no-no.
Right, as it's centered on ketchup, right?
Yeah.
And so I think kind of my go-tos there will be guacamole. While I love the queso, I usually go guacamole just to get more plant fats in there. And then what are you going to dip in there that's not going to just be that basket of chips? Or, some people can take a handful of chips, put it on their plate, and then push the basket away. And so you'd have to like reach across your friend to get to it. Whatever you got to do to not knock back that chip basket before you've even like ordered your dinner. And then ceviche, tacos, the corn tortillas, lower carbs and calories than wheat, a lot lower sodium, but even better if you can do the lettuce wrap tacos, like we said.
Yes. And people now will do those lettuce wraps. That's for everything. I mean, even though it's not part of the global cuisine mentality, you can go into a burger joint these days, all of them, and they will absolutely hook you up.
And then when you're doing a grilled platter, because almost all of these are going to have some sort of a grilled platter with, again, lean protein, fish, lean beef, but many of them are going to naturally come with some sort of bean, black beans, pinto beans, rice. So again, just asking, instead of that, can I get some grilled vegetables? Or, there's going to be, if they serve fajitas, they probably have some sort of veg that's going to be going with the fajitas.
Absolutely.
If you got a grilled platter instead of the rice and the beans, or you might say, well, I'll keep the beans because I'm just going to get black beans instead of the
You may
refried
not
beans.
want to keep those beans because oftentimes in the South and Central American restaurants, they cook those with manteca.
So that would be one to ask.
That would
How
be
are they
an ask.
prepared?
I would.
Yeah.
And they're going to
And what is the
smile
word
and
that you
nod.
said they're prepared with?
Manteca is animal fat.
Is it like lard?
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Which
It is.
sounds a lot better when you say manteca, and it's lard.
Yeah, and lard is a very common thing. It's a common ingredient in a lot of cooking, and this is old world foods, and they're comfort foods, and people are reluctant to change those. And I mean that's all going to be found all across in all of the cuisines of all of Central America and South America. You're going to find those kinds of things. We get a lot of people from Honduras and Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and you have those gorgeous tamales too. And tamales can be a nice way to eat that as well. Again, eating maybe half or sharing it with someone, and that way you wouldn't be really diving too deep in eating all those carbs, but they're really, really lovely things to eat in these restaurants.
And I think when it comes to something like that, like asking how the beans are prepared, it's one thing to ask how they're prepared, but that goes back to gauging what your server is going to be like. And if you think, oh, this is not a place that's going to humor my questions, then I would just nix the beans. Don't even worry about it. Let's go ahead and get some grilled vegetables instead or whatever to go with it.
And even the rice tends to be very plain. So it would just basically be a tomato rice. So if you really were feeling like you needed it, that wouldn't kill you. You'll notice if you ever eat the rice that comes, it's very bland and it's done purposefully. I mean, it's meant to be that way. And it's really interesting. And also, can we talk about the soups in that element, right? Because you have menudo, which is a broth, and then it has tripe and all these other things in it, and it's supposed to be, a good hangover cure or whatever. And those soups, again, you have to be careful and eat around them. There's a sopa de res, which is with beef, and it has like maybe a big round piece of corn, and it has carrots and veg, but the broth is a basic broth, a beef broth. The other one that I like a lot is a conch soup, which is typically made with coconut milk. And the other things in that soup tend to be plantains of various kinds. So those are going to not be great in terms of carbohydrates, but nutritionally,
right?
Yeah, they're pretty solid. And then the conch is pretty nice too. And then you don't have to eat the world's biggest bowl. It doesn't have to be the hot tub of soup for you to eat. You have some, and it's really satisfying and creamy. And you can really, and you can eat enough of it to be, have that satiety thing and not go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Right. And then, of course, the margaritas. If someone's at a restaurant like this, it's so typical that someone's going to get a margarita or a mojito or something.
Or a tequila.
Yeah. So with that, there's ways, I think doing something like a mojito, you can always order a mojito without the simple syrup or sugar added.
Yes.
And especially if they have fruits that they're muddling in there.
Yes.
That's going to be fine. You could do mojito, and then sometimes they might add sugar, or sometimes it might be simple syrup. You can just ask for it without either and still have something nice. A margarita is a lot harder to make that tweak, but a mojito, you can kind of special order without that, and then you've got a drink that looks like everybody else's on the table.
Absolutely. And there's, again, every one of the Latin American countries has different beverages that you can muddle with a bit to make it more fit your dietary needs and what you want to eat. And there's always something wonderful. And it's also the spirit of the places too. So I love all of the variety of South Americans, and Brazilian cuisine is fantastic because particularly in Brazil, they use a lot of tapioca starch to make their bread, so cheese bread. So if you're watching carbohydrates, no bueno. But if you're not minding those and you have celiac, or if you have a wheat intolerance, those are not made with wheat, and they have a really great texture and flavor. Right, they're phenomenal, and those are they call them cheese breads in English. In Brazilian, there's pão de queijo or queijo, depending on what part of Brazil and how you speak your Portuguese. So I don't want to hear from you. I was raised in a teeny tiny fishing village called Cascais, and so our accent is very different in Portuguese than Brazilian. So don't fuss at me, please. And so it's fascinating. You can really eat very well. There's all kinds of farofa, which again is another thing that's a Brazilian dish. Typically on a Brazilian menu, you would have that big buffet. Come on, you can eat the meats if you so, and the grilled veggies, and you know what is going to be a no-no.
And I
it's
think
pretty
something
obvious.
we didn't say at the very beginning is scan it all first. Scan the menu first, scan your options first. If it's the
Absolutely.
big Brazilian buffet, scan it first and see, because you can't eat it all. And,
Hard as you might want to try.
Right. And so always looking through the menu first. And actually something we could have said at the top of this was, look at the menu first online to get your head straight about what choices you're going to make before you're actually sitting in the restaurant and seeing all these foods pass you by, and then you get really tempted.
And then that's the thing to restaurants. And if anyone owns a restaurant that's listening, make sure your menus are up to date. For Pete's sake, everyone is on their phone, right? So,
and you get your hopes up about something, and they're like, "Oh, that was on our last menu," and you're like, "Darn it!"
I know, and I don't like when I see the word sample menu.
Me neither.
That makes me bananas, because there is no excuse for that. You're printing menus almost every day. It's a matter of cut and paste and pop it into your website, which pops
Help
it into
us
your,
out.
come on,
Help us out.
Right? Yeah.
I want to digress for just a split second. I was wondering how you knew Portuguese. So you grew up in Portugal?
I did. I spent my part of my childhood in a little tiny fishing. Well, it was a fishing village. Now it's a fancy pants resort town called Cascais. And I would love to tell you that I know why we were there, but I don't. My mom just picked us up. I was born and raised in Chicago, and my mom picked us up and moved us to Portugal.
How old were you?
I was four till about 6.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was amazing. And it's funny, I have very, very profound and very distinct memories of that time and eating and food. I learned how to make grilled sardines. I had my very first chocolate croissant at a bakery. The roads were dirt roads, because it was the 60s. And in the 60s, that was still a little bit sketchy for an American family, Caucasian American family, to be living in this tiny little part of Portugal. And so everybody kind of kept their eyeballs on us. And, there was some communism around, and it was around the time that The Sound of Music came out, and children were not allowed to see The Sound of Music when little. And I managed to talk my way into the theater with my mom and my sister, and they hid us upstairs to watch Sound of Music, because thematically the movie was not okay in the 60s for young people. And of course, today we think, well, how that doesn't even make any sense. But it had to do with the Third Reich and the whole thing. And so it was a very interesting thing. I learned to eat lobster. I learned to eat langoustine there. I learned to eat a lot of foods, and it formed a huge foundation. And in fact, when I moved to New Orleans, I got here when I was about 16. And one of the things that I threw my bags in the dorm room at Loyola, and then I jumped on the streetcar and I went to the quarter, and I was walking around, and I walked into the Desire, which is a bar that's on the corner on Bourbon Street. It still kind of is. And I walked in, and sitting on the bar was a mountain of these things. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. You people eat langoustine here in New Orleans?" And the guy looked at me like I was bananas. And he said, "Those are crawfish." And I said, "What do you mean? I had a crawfish as a pet. Who eats crawfish?" Well, we eat crawfish here in Louisiana. So he actually taught me how to eat them, and they taste absolutely nothing like langoustine. So it was really very interesting. That living there really did form a base and a foundation for a lot of, I didn't know what it would lead to, but thinking backwards, it really was important to my overall understanding of food and appreciation for it as well.
And are you fluent in Portuguese?
I was. Now I remember silly things like "no quero sapatos," which means I don't want to wear my shoes. Things like of that nature. But I was fluent in Portuguese. And at one point in time, my Portuguese was better many years ago. And when I originally interviewed with Emerald to work for him, and I looked at him and I told him, I said, you look Portuguese to me. And he flipped out and he was really excited. And he put his mom, Miss Hilda, on the phone. And this is in my interview to work in the kitchen at Flagship in 89, 90.
And she's talking about the Emerald.
Yeah,
because you
Emerald Gassi.
Yes. So yes.
It was wonderful to me. And so I talked to Miss Hilda in Portuguese, and their Portuguese was a little bit different, but we were able to work it out. And when Chef Emerald discovered that I spoke Portuguese and had lived in Portugal and all that, he was like, "You're hired." So that was really an amazing time. And I wrote
so
for
it laid
him.
the foundation for you for culinary appreciation, but it also helped to open that very first door.
Absolutely.
You probably would have gotten the job anyway, just based
know.
on you, but that helped put it over the top.
I hope so. He was the most amazing person to work for. I am very, very, very grateful to Chef Emerald. Very grateful. I wrote for him. I wrote the blog for 10 years, and he has the most incredible palate, and he really gave me a huge amount of creative freedom, and is a very, very interesting and very kind person. And I know people want to say all kinds of things, and they do, but I guess it's all based on one's own personal experience with a human being.
Right.
And my experience of him was spectacular.
I love hearing that. That's incredible.
Yeah, he was wonderful.
So all these different languages, and y'all hear how she pronounces it. I'm not even trying on these. So onto our tour of the world. We haven't talked Italian. We haven't talked Chinese, Japanese.
Well, we talked Japanese a little bit,
Yeah.
and Chinese, and all of the Asian, and we talked a little bit of the Chinese, but we didn't talk Greek, and we haven't talked Italian. And Italian is complicated for a variety of reasons, I'm sure you know, because here's the thing.
It's such a
Sicilian, are you talking Northern Italian, Southern Italian? Are we talking, what are we talking about? Pasta? I mean, the answer is, do we need to talk about pasta?
I don't think we need to talk about pasta or pizza, because both of those we know, not only is it the white starchy carb, but it's also all the stuff that goes on it. What I will say about pasta, and this is how I feel about pasta. If it is not homemade pasta, I don't even want to, it has zero, I have zero interest in it.
I'm going to change your mind.
But if it's homemade pasta, oh my gosh, I love it. And so to me, if you're at a place that has freshly made, handmade pasta, and you don't usually have the opportunity to have it, and you want it, I would say go for it, because it's such a treat.
Awesome. I love that you're going to let people. I'm
going to let you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, giving people permission from someone, with your knowledge and background, that is important, because we have to rely on our pros. So thank you for the permission.
To me, it's one of those that's so different than the pasta that you may have just always had. That's the dried pasta prepared.
So that's changing too, which is why I said, I'm going to change your mind. In Italy, I was there about a year and a half ago, and was celebrating my best friend's 50th birthday. And she and I were there, and there was a big, huge movement there, symbiosis, anything that has to do with organic, and they're very conscientious. And even now, though, that's also changing ever so slightly. But truth be told, if you can put your hands on Italian, dried, organic pasta that is grown, the wheat grown in Italy and actually made in Italy, then what I found for my body was that I did not have as bad of a response. In social media, I use the hashtag poop worthy. And that is because, unfortunately, and this is TMI, if I eat something that it has wheat in it, I get intestinal distress. Is that polite?
That's very polite.
And
hashtag poop worthy.
Hashtag poop worthy. But I found in Italy was that I did not have that when I stuck to it. And there are loads and loads of restaurants. And also the Italians are very conscientious about region and AOC and the DOC, which is their regions, the way that they have in France and the way they have in Italy, where you get certain things from certain regions and that means something, like burrata and whatever, that kinds of things. And we're able now to get a lot of that product, thank you to, of course, FedEx and all these various and sundry and companies being able to move product here. We now can have access. We have access that we never had before. So again, fresh homemade pasta. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to pass on that. Sometimes though, you get it and it's a real bummer. Yeah. Hopefully it's not.
Usually 9 times out of 10. Yeah. And my husband has started making fresh homemade pasta. It's a
Wow.
little bit of a problem. Fortunately, it doesn't happen that much because
That's
I
cool.
can't say no. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing with pulling noodles and with buckwheat and doing buckwheat and soba and stuff like and those kinds of things. And oh boy, soba noodles tend to have wheat and buckwheat, so they're not unless they're 100% buckwheat, they're not safe for those of us with wheat issues. But in Italian food, you look at everyone eating that yummy pane veal and that yummy, parmigiana, and it looks great. Molly, that's not going to be giving the thumbs up. You're not going to get that, are you?
But again, I go to, where are you? How often are you going to this restaurant? If you're in Italy, I want you to eat whatever you want and enjoy it. If you're having these dishes that are super special,
It's amazing.
but I think when you look at an Italian restaurant and an Italian menu normally, it is a challenge. One of the things that I'll often go with is the carpaccio. You
Oh,
know,
sure. Thinly sliced raw beef.
a beef carpaccio, a tuna carpaccio if they have it. But
They
I
call
think
those crudo.
and so those will be something that I'll get because it's a nice protein, it's lean. But I'm a sucker for burrata, I have to say. And what's interesting about burrata is it's one of the lower sodium cheeses.
Oh, beautiful.
So similar to like a goat cheese is a lot lower sodium, but burrata, if you have something like a fresh tomatoes with burrata, it depends on how much of it you're having or if you're splitting it with people. But that's kind of another thing that I'll do that is more fats, the cheese and the veg, but you can get away without having the breads, the crostini with it.
And then there's, the balsamic vinegar.
Yes.
Again, depending on where it's made, who's making it, what if it has a lot of sugar, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You do have to be a little conscientious on that, but you can have the balsamico and just few little dots if it's one of the ones that's a glaze that's reduced.
The reduction, yeah. And those are so
Yummy.
good.
Yeah.
And with that too, I think we were talking about the folks grating their own cheese at their table. But if you're, at a true Italian restaurant and you have, these really good strong cheeses, they're really pure cheeses and you don't really need that much of it. And so I think that that's the other thing too of depending on what you get, if you kind of have a board that has, some meats, the cheeses and how much of it are you having, that actually can be a decent appetizer that you're splitting with the table as well.
Right. So now if you go into that whole salumi thing, now that's a wonderful way of going about it. And then
they're really thinly sliced usually.
Absolutely.
And you're not getting that much of it, but there's a variety, it's flavors. And yes, a lot of times it is things that are maybe more fattier meats and stuff. But again, cured meats aren't, there's a whole other thing about that. We talked about that with Dr. Milani as well.
Yes, the cured meats because of the pink salt or some of the curing salts, which can be problematic. I happen to be very, very allergic to pink salts that are typically used in making sausages. And so I can't eat all of those things. I mean, it really gives me a problem.
So then you'll pick the cheese off of their tray. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, yes. I mean, it just depends. But I think that those kinds of things are beautiful. And nowadays, too, there's more vegetables that are coming in the part of that whole cheese platter. And I feel
like an Italian restaurant is the hardest one to go lower carb.
I agree. I was just going to tell you, I was in a restaurant in Florence and they had these crostini, and the crostini, of course, refers to the little bread toasty thing. What was on top of the tostini was perfectly legit for me to eat. So there I am scraping stuff, and they were really giving me the evil eye on that one.
And you're like, no, I'm going to go feed the ducks.
Exactly. And I felt so bad, but yeah. And then you have, wine is difficult. And then the breadsticks and even red sauce can be problematic. Depends if there's oil. Here we have a tendency to have a very sweet.
The sugar, exactly. So I think with an Italian restaurant, I think that's one where you have to like really go in with your head set and kind of look at the menu ahead of time, see if there is a fish option. Getting that pasta as your side dish as opposed to your main entree. So if your main entree is whatever that protein is, and then you have a little side plate of pasta that comes with it versus that pasta being your main attraction of it. Absolutely. But I think that's one where we have to go in and kind of like defensively, I would highly recommend looking at the menu ahead of time. I almost never personally order a salad as my main entree because I want to have something that's more hearty than that. But that's one where if most of the things are pasta, you might still be able to have a lean steak or a piece of fish or something like that.
Usually, yeah. We
So
have
there'll be something
a-
there.
always. I mean, and yeah, so we did that. Greek restaurants, I think those are Greek restaurants make it really simple because there's a lot of grilled fish and clean vegetables and feta cheese and yogurt and things that are very, very, I mean, yes, there is
And
baklava, but
oh
you
gosh,
know,
baklava. I'll have to tell you a story on the baklava. So so those, and so they're kind of the defensively is it may come with a lot of bread to dip into the
sure.
dips. And then so you can just pass on that. And again, if you've got your chicken or your fish or whatever, use that to dip in there, use your veg to dip in there. So I think the key with all these different cuisines is the stuff they're giving you extra with it, the breads, the chips, whatever that is, do without it. And whatever the stuff that you're dipping it into or whatever's the big source of the flavor, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
And so then what else can we ask them for that's a veg or something else to put in there?
That covers across all of the Mediterranean cuisines that you could think of, Persian, Anatolian, all of those things, Tunisian, which of course is North African. And we didn't get to eating Ethiopian cuisine, which is a very popular thing to eat. And that bread, injera, that is it's a giant pancake that's on the bottom. The difficulty with that one is you go, oh, well, that one's just made with buckwheat. No, in America, more often than not, in order to get that to ferment the way it needs to ferment, they often have to boost it with a little bit of all-purpose flour, often. And so maybe you only eat a little bit because it's sourdough and it's really part of the experience. So maybe you just take a tiny bit of a taste of it. Unfortunately, it's so delicious. Well, I think it is anyway. But all of those things are pulses and meats and chickens. That one's a little bit more difficult to navigate nutritionally unless you're okay with a lot of plant-based and beans and peas and things of that nature, because those stews are pretty
and using
clean.
the discipline to have those parts of it without having all the bread with it.
That makes
and it's
it really
kind of
hard.
having your mindset, and a lot, and kind of knowing, I think everyone's different in their level of how structured they want to be with themselves. And so for some people, that one taste satisfies. They didn't feel denied. They feel like, okay, I know what it tastes like. I enjoyed that and I'm good. Others, that one taste sets off a chain reaction of they can't stop. And so I think it's knowing yourself on that too, of how tight do you need to be with your parameters? Because does one taste lead to a lot more, or does one taste satisfy and you feel good?
I just had that experience the other day. I went to a place that is serving Turkish cuisine, and I know that they make fresh to order kunefe, which is shredded phyllo and a sweetened cheese and a lot of butter and a lot of simple syrup and crushed pistachios and
almost like their version of a baklava or something.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And it comes in a pan, but it has the cheese in the middle of it, and it's cooked to order in these really small, shallow metal pans. I knew I wanted to have a bite of that. So then I made adjustments elsewhere in order to allow myself to have that bite.
The negotiations.
And hashtag poop worthy. Yeah. And it is. But meanwhile, if you're eating Turkish or Persian, kebabs, right? Those are the really obvious.
Was it hard for you to stop when you had a few bites of that?
When I had one bite. The way you eat it typically is, first of all, it's about a 4-inch round. You cut it into quarters. I took a quarter of my 1/4, and then I took and cut that in half.
And you felt satisfied.
I was fine. Just
That's
yes.
nice, yeah.
And you have to get to that point. Not everybody can do that.
It's true. And knowing yourself and knowing if that's going to be enough to satisfy or enough to be a trigger for you.
Yeah, and I just needed to taste it because I never, ever, ever write about a food that I haven't tasted. Ever, ever, ever. So there was no way for me to write about it unless I tasted it and knew what it would taste like.
I think to that point too, where does that discipline come from? So thinking that through, and it's hard for someone to say, I'm going to watch my carbs because of a reason that they can't see or feel, or I'm going to watch my sodium, but they don't really, let's say it's weight loss. Weight loss is such a journey. You're going to see, it, and it's so small, and you may have made the best choices at dinner, then the scale is still up a pound the next day, and that can be hard. But when we look at the choices we're making in a restaurant based on how is it going to leave me feeling immediately, that I think can be a much bigger motivator. If we think I'm going to eat this that has all this syrups and all this sugar, and I'm going to eat this, and then in a couple of hours, I'm going to want to crawl under my desk and take a nap, or I'm going to be worthless tonight. Like I'll have zero, energy. That can be knowing how's it going to affect me right now is a much bigger motivator, I think, than trying to do something that seems like a very long way down the road.
And two, there's all kinds of different sort of thought processes on the whole thing. If you're there and you're spending your hard-earned dollar and at a restaurant versus cooking at home, there is no shame in enjoying that moment. That's what you're there for to begin with. And I personally am okay with that. We've talked about this. I practice intermittent fasting, and I do that kind of OMAD, the 1 meal a day deal. So if I know I'm eating that way, then I'm fasting, for the next 24 hours, more likely than not. I'm kind of hardcore, and I've had enormous benefit from that, but not everyone does. And so you're right. It's this whole idea of nutrition and restaurants and dining and health and weight loss is so complex because it's so dependent individually on the human, right? That's eating, your ability to have willpower on what you can and cannot eat. Um, Living your life and having fun and not taking it all so seriously. People get just nutty about all these things, and I tell people all the time, it's food. This is not the cure for terminal illness. It's dinner. So calm down and allow yourself a little bit of joy and have some fun with it. And I will tell you that personally, I've had a great deal of success when I let go of the rules
I
associated.
agree 100%. And I'll find a lot of times in restaurants, well, not a lot of times, but it happens that I'll have the judging eye cast toward me. I can't believe you're eating the bread, And I'm like, but I love it and I want to have it because this is delicious,
You
And
should
I
come
don't,
with me to the grocery store when people
right,
are looking in my
right.
basket.
Yeah. And I don't feel like I need to explain or any of that,
Right.
but it is one of these things that there is a lot of that around. So I think all of this comes to ultimately taking control of how you're ordering off the menu, whether you are doing low carb, if you have to watch your sodium, if you need to do more plants in your diet, if you're doing keto, whatever it is, whatever your goal is, taking charge of the menu, looking ahead if you can, making your decisions, seeing what your options might be, gauging the feel and the vibe of the restaurant and how much is okay do I feel comfortable asking. But ultimately, it's like you said, it's your money that you're spending, it's your time. You want to be able to enjoy it. And it's that balance of enjoying it and also doing something that's good for your body.
Absolutely. And do note this too. If you're going into restaurants that are what we call in the industry mid-level chain restaurants, the oils and the tendency is to use oils that may or may not work with what you are protocol that or your diet that you're trying to achieve. And I don't mean diet; I mean the way you eat. Not like you're on a diet, but and that is difficult because the oils they're getting in are mass quantities and they're not always the best quality. And but fine dining, you're going to get a little bit of a better opportunity. So you do have to keep that in mind. And when I teach the culinary school, and I get this room of young students, and their favorite places tend to often be a lot of these mid-level chain restaurants. And I have a huge respect for that. They are always shocked that I've never been to them. But that's just not like where I'm at. It's no shame, it's no judgment. But I always warn them. And then when we do the price costing and we recipe cost, and they're always floored, and then they have a hard time going back. So what I also tell people too is break out a little bit from that. Take a risk. Take a risk in food because one, you're going to learn something, and you're going to find that if you break away a little bit, even just one time, I know it's your hard-earned money, but if you do it just once and you find something you like, then you're going to be like, oh, wait a minute, next time and next time. Now you're adding to the palate of your brain, not necessarily to your, I don't like talking about taste buds and palates. I think that's weird. There's a habit in the food writing industry for like, it made my palate sing. No, if your palate is singing, I want you to call me because we are going to go make some big money. If those taste buds are singing, holla. I want to know about them. Then we're going to go on AGT and we're going to make that work. But more of the building a foundation, a flavor foundation in your brain that when you are tasting the food and then you can remember that and then you go to cook and you know what that food is supposed to taste like. So you're building on your whole ability to cook better, eat better, and think more broadly when you're going to eat in international cuisines. It'll help all the way around the block.
I don't think I've got anything to top it.
Oh my God.
So
I'm
not
sorry.
only are you rounding out your taste buds and your experiences, we're rounding out everything about our lifestyle when we're branching out and trying these new things and exposing ourselves. I love it. So we talked about a few things that I'll have some links in the show notes of our episodes. So I am so grateful to Lorin for joining us today. It's been a blast. I feel like we could talk food for a very long time.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
so many stories. There's so many funny things. There's so many mishaps. We could probably do a podcast also on mishaps, on things that we've tried that were just bombed.
Disasters?
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
let's do that one day. That would
Okay,
be
that
fun
would be
because that
awesome.
would be fun. Okay, thank you, Lorin, so much for spending this time with me. It's incredible.
Thank you so much, Molly. Really, it's been a joy and a pleasure. And I learned a lot myself. Thank you.
Me too. Thanks. So I mentioned we'll have the links that we talked about in the show notes of this episode. And I am Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to your Apple podcast and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life possible.